I'm remarrying with my new bride. Thanks for everything so far. Robert cheerfully laughed as he said this. The mother-in-law standing next to him also added with a broad smile. You should get a divorce and leave. It seems that in Robert and his mother-in-law's view, it's a done deal to welcome his mistress as the new wife. It means I'm being phased out. But I'm not troubled by it. Sooner or later, I knew this would happen. Robert is smitten with his mistress, and his in-laws have completely accepted her. But of course, I haven't just been sitting quietly. I had a surprise prepared for when this happened. Now, Robert, are you ready? My name is Gina Irving. I'm 35. I married Robert when I was 27. Currently, we live together in an apartment. Let's have children when we're a bit more comfortable financially. Years have passed since he said that. Before we knew it, both Robert and I have grown older. It's time we seriously consider having children. Just as I was thinking this, I sensed that Robert was cheating. Robert has always been bad at lying. I have to work late today. That has become Robert's recent catchphrase. But it's clear that this is a lie if you look at his pay slips. He also sneaks out alone on holidays. I immediately thought he might be cheating. But somewhere in my heart, I still believed in him. I loved Robert so much that I married him. I thought he felt the same. That's why I decided to confront Robert. I hoped that if I told him I wanted him to stop cheating, he would agree. However, why do you think I'm cheating? This happened at the dinner table. As we sat across from each other and I started to speak, Robert frowned. I hurriedly said, You've been making excuses to leave the house recently, haven't you? You doubt me over that. Robert was furious. But at that moment, I felt relieved inside. Robert wasn't cheating after all. I thought he got angry because I doubted him. I was naive. That's what I mean. What? I hate your suspicious nature, Gina. Maybe that's why I looked at her. Her who? My voice trembled. My heart raced. Could he actually be cheating? I leaned forward over the table. Who is she? A junior at work. She's honest and kind, unlike you. Robert said this, then his expression turned blissful. If I could be with her, every day would be fun. As if a young girl would care for you. I said this to convince myself. Robert is in his 40s. He doesn't earn much. I was a model in my youth, you know. Robert retorted. That's right. Robert briefly worked as a model when he was younger. I remember because he's bragged about it several times. In fact, Robert is still tall and slim, and he still looks well put together. His features are handsome. He could still pass for someone in his late 20s or early 30s. But at the company, his real age is known. While I was still thinking, no way, Robert said. I can't stay with a wife who doubts me this much. Divorce, divorce. He shouted this and then handed me a piece of paper. It was a divorce petition. You're joking, right? I'm serious. Bye, Gina. Saying this, Robert walked out into the hallway and disappeared somewhere from the front door. Maybe he'll stay at a friend's house, or... I held the divorce petition, my head drooping. The next morning, Robert returned. Perhaps because of what happened yesterday, he moved quietly. He seemed to have come to grab his bag and change of clothes for work. Robert. What? When I called out to him, Robert flinched and stepped back. I was handing him a lunch box. Robert looked at me in surprise. Is this? I made lunch. I haven't made it recently, so I thought you might like to eat it. Oh, okay. I will then. Though he didn't say thank you, Robert seemed pleased. I was satisfied. Good. Maybe there was still a chance to make things right. Perhaps Robert wasn't entirely serious about the divorce papers yesterday. That's what I thought. Then, I was dropped into the depths of shock and disappointment. Why? The lunch I had made was exactly as I left it, dumped in the trash can. I had lunch with a colleague. He said this and sat down on a chair. So, is dinner ready yet? How can you say that after throwing away the lunch I made? I couldn't stay calm any longer. You could have eaten it later, there was no need to throw it away. Well, Robert said with a wry smile. Your lunchbox is just embarrassing. Embarrassing. Yes. It's so embarrassing I couldn't show it to anyone. And then, Hannah. Hannah who? I screamed, even though I understood that Hannah was Robert's affair partner. She's a junior at work. She makes lunch for me every day. It's stylish, unlike yours. So you threw my lunch away. After seeing Hannah's lunch, I couldn't bear to look at yours. Robert was laughing dismissively. It was a condescending expression. I was certain. I had never heard of just a junior from work making lunch every day. There was no more room for doubt. Robert seemed to have become defiant over this incident. He began to openly mention Hannah's name at home. I'm going back to my parents' house this weekend. Robert suddenly said. I tilted my head. Was there something you needed to do this week? Just leave it. He ended the conversation as if he wasn't interested in my opinion. And then the weekend. When I went to his parents' house, there was a stranger there. This is Hannah. Nice to meet you. Just as Robert had always praised her, she was a lovely woman. Exactly Robert's type. Why is she here? I asked Robert a very valid question. In response, Robert laughed. I introduced her to my parents. She's going to be the new wife. What? I was stunned. The new wife. While I'm still here. I told you before. Robert continued, looking as if he wasn't in the wrong at all. Gina, you're too suspicious, and your taste is just country. You're not right for me. What's that supposed to mean? I was at a loss for words. What kind of nerve does this man have to be able to say such things? Hannah started to speak. With a look of apology but still about to drop a bombshell. I'm pregnant. I'm finally going to be a father. Robert hugged Hannah happily and laughed. Unconsciously, I was caressing my own stomach. I can have children too, you know?
Yeah.
But if I'm going to have kids, I want them to be good-looking. That's why you're not an option. That's horrible. I had always believed in Robert's words. From the beginning, he had never planned to have children with me. A child with Hannah is bound to be cute. Robert said proudly. Hannah looked troubled as she glanced at me. The mother-in-law, who had been watching, gave me a sharp look. It was a piercing glare. You have no complaints, right? Yes. I had no choice but to nod. Robert spoke to me in a cold voice, though he was laughing. I wondered how he could sound so cold while laughing. I'm remarrying with my new bride. Thanks for everything so far. You should get a divorce and leave. The mother-in-law, standing next to Robert, was also grinning broadly. The two of them intended to drive me out and welcome Hannah as the new wife. And I was being discarded. I sighed. Honestly, I had suspected this might happen the moment they told me we were going to his parents' house. Even more so, I had realized it when Robert started talking about Hannah at home. It wasn't long before our relationship would end. Now, that premonition had become reality. It can't be helped. I decided to be resolute. After all, I had prepared a surprise for this day. I took a deep breath and said, "Huh? I've already divorced, and that woman." "What?" The room froze. Robert, his face contorted, retorted, "That's a pathetic excuse." "Already divorced? You and me?" "Yes." "Didn't you hand me the divorce papers before?" My voice came out calmer than I expected. Yes, I was composed now. I would no longer be deceived by Robert's words or smiles. "That divorce paper had your signature on it." "So, I also signed it." In fact, I had submitted it after it was decided we would visit his parents' house. I had resolved that it was over between Robert and me. Still, I hadn't expected him to bring Hannah to his parents' house. "So, you and I are already divorced." "Huh, really? That's convenient then. Right?" "That's what I thought too, so I took care of it beforehand." As I said this, Robert's mood improved. "Good preparation. Thanks, Gina, for divorcing me. Now I can be with Hannah without any worries." "You're welcome." It might have been the first time Robert thanked me. I felt a sense of emptiness. Until recently, I had loved this man. Really, I had no eye for people. But Robert was no better. "You can't remarry, though." "What?" "Why not?" "Because she's already married." "What?" At my words, Robert looked at Hannah in shock. In a pleading tone, he asked her, "Hannah, tell me Gina is lying, right? You and I have no intention of being with you." Hannah stated it clearly. Shock rippled through Robert and his mother. Their eagerly anticipated plan had collapsed, understandably. Why? Because it was just a fling for me. Hannah still had a troubled expression, but her tone was sharp. "I did say I was pregnant, but I never said it was your child. You assumed too quickly." I was wondering what to do. After saying that, Hannah looked at me. I'm relieved. It's good that his wife is such a decisive person. "No worries." I gave a wry smile. It was like a poorly scripted comedy. The woman he claimed was right for him had long been married to another man. I wonder how Robert feels now. Well, I should be going now. Wait, Hannah. Hannah. Robert desperately tried to stop her, but Hannah did not look back. The mother-in-law was so shocked that her dentures almost fell out. Robert was devastated for a while, but then he glared at me. "What does this mean, Gina?" "I hired a detective to investigate. Then I found out she was married. By the way, her husband is." Now it was my turn to be cheerful. I said it with a sense of pride. "Her husband is your boss." "No, don't lie." Hannah and the manager never even make eye contact at the company. Robert's voice was desperate, and I felt sad. He had never been so earnest for me. "They're just professional at work, aren't they?" I easily dismissed Robert's argument. Robert held his head in his hands. "Hannah is Manager Johnson's. What will happen to me if this gets out?" "It's okay." I said it with a broad smile. The sadder my heart felt, the more I smiled. "I've already told everything to Manager Johnson." "What are you doing?" Robert looked like he was about to cry. Being embarrassed by the Hannah incident was just the beginning. The real show was about to start. "My son is the victim here," she said in a pained voice. "Deceived by that woman, and now betrayed by you too. At this rate, my son could lose his job." "If that's the case, I was deceived by your son," I said with all the smile I could muster, though my lips trembled slightly. I genuinely loved Robert. I was happy to be married to him. Robert, Hannah, and I had all contributed to the destruction of that happiness. If that's the case. But it's over now. Robert chose another woman over me. I respect his decision. Oh. As she glared at my smiling face, the mother-in-law slumped to the floor. Huh? At that moment, Robert's smartphone rang. He checked the caller and turned pale. Manager Johnson. Oh, good timing. I urged Robert to answer the phone. You better answer quickly, or it'll only get worse. Whose fault do you think this is? Well, I said it as if it were obvious. It's your own fault. Not even realizing you were being played. Besides, didn't you notice that Hannah and Manager Johnson share the same last name?
Ah.
Robert's face turned even bluer. He looked at me several times as if seeking help, but I did nothing. Robert hesitantly answered the phone. Manager. You. What are you doing with my wife? Even standing at a distance, his voice was loud enough to hear. My wife is pregnant. And you, knowing that. It was Hannah who approached me. Robert was outraged. But it was a mistake. Is that so? Oops. And manager, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken badly about your wife. It's not what it looks like, Enough, don't ever come to the office again, I don't want to see your face. Manager. Robert continued to apologize desperately, but it was futile, and the call ended. Like his mother, Robert slumped to the ground. It's a lie. This can't be happening. I wish you had told me it was a lie. I blurted out my true feelings. I knew I shouldn't get emotional, but I couldn't hold it back. When I was sure you were cheating. How do you think I felt? How should I know, and it's not like that. Robert spat out. It's your fault for not being attractive enough to keep me from cheating. You're suspicious, yet you let yourself go. Because you never help around the house. I was shouting. I managed all the household chores alone, had no time to dress up. Instead of buying cosmetics, I spent on our living expenses. I've been supporting this home. Understand? It's your fault for not managing your time better. Robert still refused to admit any fault. Don't blame everything on me. You always make bland food, how could you spend so much money on that? Those are recipes from my mother. Don't speak ill of them. I finally let the smile fall from my face. I was truly angry. This might be the first time I had ever shown anger towards him. I had been afraid of being disliked by Robert, so I never spoke my mind. But now, things were different. We were no longer husband and wife. I decided to say what I wanted. You always say what sounds good, and yet you push all the troublesome things onto me. Take a look at reality for once. What did you say? Stop it, both of you. The mother-in-law staggered to her feet, pressing her hand to her brow as she spoke painfully. Both of you, just go home. I can't stand any more commotion. Mom. Are you abandoning me too? Robert cried out in anguish, but his mother did not respond to him. I left the in-laws' house alone, catching a taxi. Robert and I parted ways without conceding a single step to each other. Sigh. I called my mother, feeling depressed. When I explained the situation, she sounded sad. I can't believe Robert turned out to be that kind of person. What are you going to do now? I haven't decided yet. That was the truth. Even though I didn't want to worry my mother, I ended up sharing my true feelings. For now, let me stay over. After a few days, I'll find an apartment or something and move out. You don't have to do that. My mother was considerate. You've done enough. Just come home and rest, okay?
Yeah.
I decided to take my mother's advice. My sister and her husband were also visiting my parents' house. Big sis. Are you okay? You look awful. I'm fine. From now on, I won't have to go through any more trouble. I replied with a smile. My sister had just given birth to her first child. Seeing the baby sleeping in her arms and her husband watching over them, tears welled up in my eyes. Big sis. Sorry. Really, it's nothing. Because I had separated from Robert. I would no longer be troubled by him. I was free. Yet, I couldn't stop the tears. Gina.
Yeah.
My mother took my hand and led me out into the hallway. Go to your room. It's clean and ready for you to use. Thank you, Mom. I thanked my mother and headed to my room. The room was as clean as my mother had said. It had been years since I spent time in this room. Yet it felt as comfortable as if I had been here just yesterday. My mother must have been cleaning it even while I was away. Feeling grateful, I lay down on the bed. The following days were peaceful. The peace was disturbed only when a figure stood at the front door. Gina. I know you're there, come out. What do you want? I confronted Robert, feeling fed up. In just a few days, he had become emaciated. Robert had relied on me for all household chores, couldn't cook for himself. And from his disheveled appearance, it seemed he had lost his job too. Despite this, Robert spoke in a cloying voice. Gina, can't we start over? What? His coaxing tone once made my heart flutter. But now, it only disgusted me. To think that I had been deceived by such a man and lived with him. In that moment, I was acutely aware. I had no feelings left for Robert. Don't say things you don't mean. My voice grew stern naturally. Yet Robert wouldn't give up. I want to start over. The thing with Hannah changed me. I won't cheat again. Let's go to another city and start anew. Oh, really? I was utterly astounded. How could he so smoothly say things he didn't mean? I could see right through Robert's true intentions. He saw me as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper. That's why he wanted me back. Nothing more. I wasn't important to him. What happened to Hannah? She got a severe scolding from her husband. Turns out the baby might not even be his, and she was kicked out of the house. Oh, isn't that wonderful? I said sarcastically. Now you can be with Hannah. She was just using me. How could I be with her? Robert shrunk as if he were the victim. Even now, he was trying to use me. She deserves it. Besides, she'll just deceive another man. Oh, I hate it. I hope she doesn't find another man. Hatred was evident in Robert's voice. It seemed he had shifted all the blame to Hannah. That's why he felt no guilt in coming to fetch me again, thinking he had done nothing wrong. Sorry, but no. I made my intentions clear. I can't live with you anymore. Because I've come to truly despise you from the bottom of my heart. Don't act tough, Gina. You still have feelings for me, don't you? Stunned by his conceited remark. I wondered how he could possibly still believe that I harbored any feelings for him. I'm serious. I really do hate you. Gina. Robert took a step closer, and at that moment, I screamed. Mom. Call the police. Gina. What? I can't deal with this anymore. It's over between us, do you understand? I could hear my mother's footsteps approaching. The neighbors, alerted by my loud voice, also started to appear. They all glared at Robert uniformly. Damn it, I'll be back. Don't come back. Robert fled as if escaping. After that, he didn't come to the house in person again. Instead, he started calling at all hours of the day. I want to start over. Gina, please come back and live with me. Are you joking? I'm serious. I can't live without you. That was probably true. Robert had never helped with the housework. It seemed he had always relied on his mother when he was single. Now that you mention it, I suddenly remembered something. There was one time I went back to the apartment. Not for Robert's sake. I had left with only what I was wearing, so I went back to pick up my belongings. There, I encountered a couple arguing fiercely. So, I've left my husband, and I'm willing to be with you. Don't joke with me. You weren't left, you were thrown out. Robert and Hannah were making a scene. I turned to leave, pretending I hadn't seen them. That's when Robert noticed me. Gina. You came back. Robert, his face lighting up, started to rush towards me, but I stopped him with both hands. I just came to get my things. You say that, but you were worried about me, weren't you? Wow, how self-deluded can you be? Hannah, standing behind, rolled her eyes. Robert turned back and snapped at her, shut up. Then he turned his attention back to me. Gina, let's live together again. We'll remarry, and this time, it'll just be the two of us. I told you I'd call the police if you came near. Robert hesitated for a moment at my warning, but then he regained his smile. Please, Gina, forgive me. I'll help with the housework and never look down on you again. And of course, no more cheating. That's certainly out of the question. You were just being played. What? Robert's face twisted with anger. Enough already. I'm saying all this to you, and you're ignoring it? I'm not ignoring it. I'm just not interested. Pfft. Hannah burst out laughing. I then turned to her. Can you manage on your own to raise your child? That's none of your business. Hannah frowned. The charm and ease she had shown at the in-laws' house were no longer present. Right. I nodded. Just let me say this. I couldn't have my own children. That's why I'm envious of you. Humph. Hannah put her hands on her hips. Her look was challenging, as if sizing me up. But really, it was I who should have been assessing her. That's why I'm worried about your baby. Leave me alone. Hannah spat out, clearly annoyed, as she rubbed her belly. I'll raise this child with my own efforts. That's good. I smiled with relief. Despite her complicated relationships, Hannah seemed to have the resolve to be a mother. Then, I'm glad. I don't need your concern. Bye. Hannah walked away briskly. Meanwhile, Robert was still shouting, don't ignore me. Gina, move aside. I'm just here to pick up my things. Gina. Robert tried to elicit sympathy with a pitiful voice, but I sharply told him. Move. Startled, Robert stepped aside. I entered the apartment where I used to live. There was no sense of nostalgia. Just a familiarity with the layout that allowed me to efficiently gather my belongings. As I exited through the front door, Robert stood there looking lost. I glanced at him briefly and then left the apartment complex. I decided to settle back at my parents' house. Being the eldest daughter, it was inevitable that I would return to take care of my parents eventually. Getting used to living at home again wasn't a bad idea. Now, I help out with the household chores and the garden. Occasionally, my sister visits with her husband and their daughter. She's adorable. Even as I smiled, I felt a pang of loneliness deep inside. Not having children of my own was still a source of sorrow for me. Hey, do you remember Kent, your childhood friend? One day, my mother brought him up in a cautious tone. What about Kent? He's still single. And, well, how about meeting him just once? Mom. I managed a bitter smile. I appreciated that my mother was looking out for me, but I was thoroughly disillusioned with marriage. Wouldn't that bother Kent? Me, of all people. Actually. She leaned forward, eager to continue. Kent was the one who suggested it when he saw you were back. What? I was surprised. Kent had always been a bit chubby and not particularly handsome. But he was attentive and kind. Now, he was a teacher at our local middle school, our alma mater. Maybe. I was non-committal. I was curious about meeting Kent, but felt strange about it being set up as a match. A few days later, I found myself walking through a shopping mall with Kent. Let me carry that for you. It's okay. I was awkward and a bit curt with Kent, but he just smiled warmly and accepted it. He looked different from what I remembered. Kent had slimmed down and grown taller, his appearance now more commanding and reliable. Sorry, Gina, for springing this on you suddenly. About that. We sat down at a cafe under the guise of taking a break. After ordering, I finally voiced my question. Why did you want to meet me? That is. He hesitated for just a moment, then composed himself, his expression firming up. With a look of determination in his eyes, he spoke. When I heard you got married, I was shocked. That's when I realized I liked you. Kent. An awkward silence fell between us. It was unsettling, yet not unpleasant. Feeling attracted to someone felt like a nostalgic emotion. After dating Kent for 6 months, I married him. Unlike the flashy wedding with Robert, Kent preferred a quiet ceremony with just family and friends. I appreciated that. Our house was close to my parents, so I could check on them daily. Kent was hardworking and beloved by his students. So, about one of my students. That sounds tough. We chuckled together at the dinner table. Surrounded by dishes made from vegetables we grew in our garden. We stocked up on meat and seasonings during our weekend supermarket trips. The rhythm of our new life gradually took shape. Gina. What is it? Have you thought about having children? I paused to think. Kent loved children, and I still wanted them. I've thought about it. I see. He smiled, relieved. A year and a half later, we had a child who, ironically, resembled my mother despite my hopes they'd look like Kent. Our family and relatives couldn't help but laugh. Let's take a character from Mom's name and call her Christina. I like that. Kent repeatedly called out to our daughter, Christina. As I walked through the garden with her in my arms, Kent by my side. Gentle and kind Kent. I wondered why I hadn't chosen someone like him sooner. Kent. What's up? Thank you for waiting for me. Gina. Tears welled up in Kent's eyes as he hugged me. Christina giggled in my arms. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage sooner. Because of that, you went through so much. It was my lack of judgment. After all, my most important person had always been right here, by my side.